After my husband died, his brother proposed to me. That same day, I found my husband's journal, and a letter from his lawyer. I read it, packed my things, and disappeared from their lives without a word. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe. We truly need your love and support. And tell us in the comments, what's one life lesson everyone should hear before it's too late? Your words could make a difference. The air was heavy and still, thick with the scent of freshly turned earth and wilting flowers. My husband Michael was gone, and the silence he left behind was a physical weight. That's when his brother, Victor, decided to shatter it. He stepped before me, his eyes scanning the crowd of mourners, and dropped to one knee in the damp grass. A collective gasp rippled through our friends and family. From his pocket, he produced a velvet box, a vulgar black heart against the somber day. His voice, slick with a practiced sorrow, boomed for all to hear. "Sarah, I know you're lost. Michael would want you to be safe, to be cherished. Let me do that. Marry me." For a heartbeat, the world stopped. I felt the burn of 100 eyes on my face, the weight of their pity and shock. But looking at Victor, I didn't see a grieving brother. I saw a vulture circling. A cold, hard anger I didn't know I possessed rose up from the depths of my grief, sharp and clear. I took a step forward, my voice low and shaking with fury, but loud enough for him to hear every single word. "Get up, Victor. Get off your knees. You dare to turn my husband's funeral into a stage for your ambition? You dishonor him, you dishonor me, and you dishonor our children with this disgusting performance. This moment is about him, not you." He rose, but the look on his face wasn't shame. It was a flash of annoyance, quickly replaced by a mask of deep, sorrowful concern. And then he delivered his master stroke. He turned away from me and addressed the crowd, our friends, my family. "You see," he said, his voice breaking with false emotion. "This is what I was afraid of. The grief has her completely undone. She isn't thinking clearly. She needs us, she needs me, now more than ever, to make the right decisions for her." In that single, brilliant move, he hadn't just dismissed my anger, he had weaponized it against me, painting me as a hysterical widow who couldn't be trusted. That was the cruelest blow of all. I watched the faces of my friends shift from being shocked at him to being worried about me. I saw the doubt flicker in my own children's eyes. In that moment, I was utterly alone, trapped in a narrative he had created where my righteous fury was just proof of my instability. He had won. The crowd saw a strong man trying to hold a broken family together, and a poor, fragile woman who was falling apart at the seams. He smiled, a tiny, sad, triumphant little smile that no one else saw. He believed he had just checkmated me. I could have screamed. I could have laid out every one of his past sins, every calculated move I had watched him make over the years. But I knew it wouldn't matter. He had already won this round, this public battle. So, I did the only thing I could. I met his eyes and held his gaze, letting him see the ice that had formed where my tears used to be. I didn't say a word. I simply turned and walked away, leaving him to play the part of the hero. Let him have his victory. Let them all think I was broken. He thought he was taking control of my life, but all he did was declare war. He had no idea that the game was much bigger than this pathetic graveside theater. He had no idea what was waiting for me back at the house, tucked away in the quiet pages of my husband's journal. He thought he was writing my future, but he was wrong. Michael had already written it. And in it, Victor had no part to play at all. My brother-in-law thought he was a king making a power play, but he was just a pawn about to be swept off the board. Driving home from the funeral, the memory of Victor kneeling in the mud played over and over in my mind. His betrayal wasn't just in the audacity of the proposal, it was in how he tried to rewrite the story of my life with Michael, turning our love into a vulnerability he could exploit. Our story didn't begin with weakness. It began in a crowded college library, two kids with more dreams than money, highlighting textbooks and sharing cheap coffee. I was going to be a landscape architect, designing parks and public spaces. But when Michael's career took off and the children came, my blueprints got put away, replaced by school schedules and meal plans. I became the CEO of our family, the silent partner who managed the chaos so he could build the empire. And I was happy to do it, because we were a team, building one life, together. That life was my masterpiece. It was in the scraped knees I bandaged, the holidays I orchestrated, the family dinners where laughter was the main course. I was the keeper of our history, the quiet center that held everything together. Michael always said I was his rock, but over time, a rock can start to feel like part of the landscape, solid, dependable, and easy to overlook. The children grew up, and my role, once so hands-on and demanding, became more invisible. I was just there. The constant, predictable foundation that everyone else built their lives upon, never imagining it could have cracks of its own. The first tremor came a year before Michael's death, at our 21st anniversary dinner. Michael raised his glass, his eyes soft with a love that still felt new. He spoke of our journey, our partnership, our future. Then Victor, who was sitting with us, leaned back with a smirk I always hated and raised his own glass. "Well said, brother," he chimed in. "You've got the perfect wife, the perfect family. If you ever decide you want out, or if, heaven forbid, anything ever happens to you, just know that Sarah wouldn't have to look far. I'd be more than happy to step in and pick up where you leave off." The words landed with a thud in the middle of the table. Michael laughed, clapping his brother on the back. "That's my brother," he said, always thinking ahead. But I couldn't laugh. A cold dread washed over me as I saw the look in Victor's eyes. It wasn't a joke. It was an assessment. It was the first time I realized that to him, I wasn't a person. I was a position. I was an asset tied to my husband's life, a role that could be filled by another man if the current one was no longer available. That comment was a quiet poison that dripped into our lives for the next year. I tried to dismiss it as Victor just being Victor, but I couldn't forget the look on his face. He wasn't just making a tasteless joke, he was putting in an application. Before we left for the cemetery, our house was a suffocating sea of black suits and quiet condolences. Every sympathetic glance felt like a stone being added to the weight on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I slipped out of the living room, desperate for a pocket of silence, and stood in the hallway that led to the kitchen. I just wanted a single moment to feel the ground beneath my feet before the final, terrible act of burying my husband. But there is no silence in a house full of mourners. Through the crack in the kitchen door, I heard Victor's voice, not loud, but carrying the smooth authority he always wore like a well-fitted suit. "You know Sarah's going to be completely lost now," he was saying to a small group. I recognized the other voices, a few family friends, and my best friend, Brenda. "Michael was her entire life," Victor continued, his tone dripping with false concern. "Without him, she has no direction. I honestly worry about her. I'm going to have to step in to handle things. I'll take care of her, otherwise, she'll fall apart." He was painting a portrait of me as a helpless child, a fragile doll who would shatter without a man to hold her up. I stood there, frozen, waiting for someone, for Brenda, to defend me. The defense never came. Instead, I heard Brenda's voice, laced with a casual pity that cut me deeper than any insult. "She's always seemed a bit delicate to me," she said, as if discussing the weather. Brenda, my friend of 20 years, the woman who had seen me raise 2 children, manage a household, and support a husband through every crisis. In her eyes, all that strength was just delicacy. A life's work of holding my family together, dismissed in a single, careless sentence. It was a betrayal so profound it stole the air from my lungs. Just then, the kitchen door swung open and my daughter, Emily, walked out. She stopped short when she saw me. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I was hoping for an ally, a lifeline. Instead, her face mirrored the exact same pity I had just heard in the kitchen. She didn't see her mother, the woman who had taught her to be strong. She saw the fragile, incapable creature Victor had just described. In her gaze, I saw my own erasure. I realized Victor hadn't just been talking, he had been campaigning, and he had won. In the eyes of my friends, and even my own child, I was no longer the matriarch of our family. I was just a problem to be managed. I stood there, invisible in my own hallway, and felt something in me break. Or maybe, it was something finally breaking free. The 2 weeks after the funeral were a blur of sympathetic casseroles and hollow-eyed relatives. I existed in a fog, adrift in my own home, which no longer felt like mine. The final blow came when Victor sat me down in my own living room, my children on either side of him, and gently laid out his plan. He suggested, with a voice full of unbearable kindness, that I should leave. He thought it would be best for me to stay with my sister for a few months, to rest and recover while he managed the estate. I looked at my children, Emily and Adam, praying they would object. Instead, they just nodded along, their faces full of the same pity Victor projected. "He's right, Mom," Emily said softly. "You need a break from all this." They weren't just agreeing with him, they were dismissing me. They were politely, lovingly, pushing me out of my own life. So I went upstairs. I didn't pack photo albums or treasured keepsakes. I grabbed a single, small overnight bag and filled it with a few changes of clothes. This wasn't a vacation, it was an amputation. On the perfectly made bed that Michael and I had shared, I left a short, simple note. "I'm not broken," it read. "I just need space. Please don't contact me." I knew they would read it as proof of my fragility, another cry for help. But the words weren't for them. They were for me. I drove for hours, with no destination in mind, just a desperate need to put miles between me and the woman they thought I was. The highways bled into one another until I found myself in a sleepy, forgotten coastal town, a place Michael and I had visited once on a whim. I checked into a rundown inn that smelled of sea salt and bleach. For 3 days, I didn't leave the room. I let myself completely unravel, mourning not just for my husband, but for the family I thought I had, and for the quiet, accommodating woman I had allowed myself to become. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight that made it impossible to even think about the future. On the 4th day, a desperate thirst finally forced me out into the gray afternoon. I wandered into a small coffee shop, my hair a mess, my eyes swollen. When the young woman at the counter asked for my name, I hesitated. I couldn't say, Sarah. That name felt like it belonged to someone else, a weak woman I no longer recognized. The barista must have seen the panic in my eyes. She just gave me a small, kind smile and said, "It's okay. We'll just call you Mystery Lady for today." That simple phrase, that small act of anonymous kindness, was the first breath of fresh air I'd had in weeks. It was permission to be someone else, someone without a history, without a family that pitted her. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than pain. I wasn't poor, fragile Sarah. I was the Mystery Lady. And a mystery can have any ending it wants. That night, I walked along the beach as the sun bled into the ocean. The air was cold, but my grief was a fire that kept me from feeling it. I saw a man and a woman walking ahead of me, their hands linked, their heads bent close together as they shared a quiet laugh. It was such a simple, ordinary moment, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow. The easy intimacy, the shared silence, the simple comfort of having your person beside you, it was everything Michael and I had lost. The pain was so sharp and sudden it drove me back to the sterile quiet of my motel room, my heart aching for a connection that was gone forever. Back in the room, my eyes landed on the single bag I had packed. Inside was Michael's old leather journal, something he'd scribbled in for years but that I had never read. It always felt too private, like reading his mind. But tonight, the loneliness was a gaping wound, and I just wanted to feel close to him. With trembling hands, I opened it, the worn pages smelling faintly of him. I wasn't looking for answers, I was just looking for a ghost of my husband. As I thumbed through his familiar handwriting, my fingers brushed against a thick bulge in the back pocket. It was a crisp, formal envelope from his law firm. My heart started to pound. This was something else. This wasn't a memory, it was a message. I tore it open, and inside, there was another, smaller envelope with my name written on it in Michael's hand. I held my breath as I read his words. "My Sarah," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I've had this strange feeling lately, not about my health, but about Victor. He's not who he used to be. He's been pressuring me about our finances, and it doesn't feel right. Please don't let him make you feel small. You've always been the strongest one between us. You just forget sometimes. The letter fell from my trembling fingers. He had seen it. He had seen the subtle shifts in his brother, the possessiveness I thought I was imagining. He believed in me. The tears that came then were different. They were tears of grief, yes, but also of profound, earth-shattering relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't delicate. I was seen. After a moment, I picked up the other documents from the lawyer. They were dense with legal terms, but the meaning was brutally clear: a trust, set up in my name only. I was the sole trustee. Our children were the beneficiaries. And then, a single line that changed everything: Victor was named once, for the sole purpose of being explicitly and completely excluded from all of it. Michael hadn't just left me a letter, he had left me a shield and a sword. He had left me a detailed plan, complete with our lawyer's name and direct number. The broken woman who had cried over a cup of coffee just that morning began to fade. In her place, someone else was starting to form, someone who understood that this was no longer about grief. It was about justice. Victor thought he was playing a game against a helpless widow. He had no idea he was playing against Michael. And I was about to make my husband's final move. The morning after I read Michael's letter, I checked out of that rundown inn. The woman who had checked in was a ghost, but the woman who walked out was on a mission. I found a small, furnished apartment on a quiet street, a place with clean lines and no memories. It wasn't a home, it was a headquarters. My first objective was the phone call. I sat with Michael's documents spread out before me, my heart pounding as I dialed the number for his lawyer. When a calm, professional voice answered, I took a deep breath. "My name is Sarah," I said, my own voice steadier than I expected. "My husband was Michael. I am calling about the trust he established." The lawyer's tone wasn't pitying or condescending. He was respectful, direct, and treated me not as a grieving widow, but as the sole trustee of a significant estate. With every question he answered, with every legal term he calmly explained, a layer of the fog I'd been living in for weeks began to lift. He was the first person to speak to me like I was capable, and that small act of professional respect was like water in a desert. That one phone call confirmed it all. Michael's plan was real, the power was real, and it was now, officially, in my hands. The weeks that followed were my education. I spent my days in the public library, using their computers to research everything from fiduciary responsibility to estate law. I filled notebooks with questions for the lawyer, learning the full scope of what Michael had done to protect me and the children. I opened a new bank account that Victor didn't know existed. I was no longer reacting to my life, I was studying it, preparing to take control. I started to change on the outside, too. I threw out the frumpy, comfortable clothes I had hidden inside and bought a few simple, well-fitting outfits. I got a sharp, no-nonsense haircut. One morning, I caught my reflection and saw that the hunted, fearful look in my eyes was gone, replaced by a patient, watchful stillness. I was becoming a stranger to myself, and I liked it. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. What I was feeling was cold and clear. It was about executing a plan with precision. It was about honoring my husband's last wish, that I not be made to feel small. While Victor was back home, playing the part of the concerned brother and trying to figure out how to manage the hysterical widow, I was 500 miles away, quietly assembling an arsenal of legal and financial facts. He had no idea the woman he was trying to save was already gone. And the one he was about to meet was someone he could never have imagined. After a month of silent preparation, it was time to make the first move. I instructed my lawyer to be brief and professional. The letter he sent to Victor wasn't emotional or accusatory, it was a dry, formal notice. It simply stated that all matters concerning Michael's estate were being handled exclusively by his firm, and that Victor was not authorized to act on its behalf. It was a simple, legal wall, and it was the first of many I intended to build. My lawyer later told me that Victor called him within an hour of receiving it, his voice shifting from confused charm to indignant anger. He was politely, and firmly, stonewalled. That evening, the voicemail started. The first one was full of feigned concern. "Sarah, darling, there's been some kind of mix-up with the lawyers. Call me so we can sort this out." A few days later, the tone changed. "Sarah, I tried to access the business account to cover some of Michael's expenses and it's been frozen. What is going on? This is irresponsible." He was used to having access, to being on the inside. Suddenly, he was just another outsider, and he couldn't stand it. The doors Michael had left open to him were now being closed, one, by a ghost. The real blow came the following week. He had tried to log into Michael's extensive investment portfolio, the one he had always offered to help manage. Access denied. He was completely locked out. From what I pieced together later, this was when his confident facade truly began to crumble. My children, Emily and Adam, saw their strong, decisive uncle become irritable and obsessed. He would pace around the house on his phone, his voice tight with frustration. His story about managing things for my own good was falling apart, because it was becoming clear to everyone that he couldn't actually manage a single thing. I felt a quiet, grim satisfaction, not in his panic, but in the beautiful, simple justice of Michael's plan. I wasn't doing anything cruel, I was simply allowing the truth to surface. Victor's power had always been an illusion, built on his access to his brother's success. Now that the access was gone, the illusion was shattering. He started leaving me angry, desperate messages. "This is a nightmare, Sarah. You have no idea what you're doing. You need to call me before you destroy everything Michael built." He was fighting a ghost, yelling at a system he couldn't control. He thought he was dealing with a bureaucratic mess. The time was coming to show him he wasn't fighting a system. He was fighting me. The day of the reckoning was a crisp, clear autumn morning. My lawyer had summoned them to his office for a preliminary meeting about the estate. I could picture Victor walking into that polished conference room, radiating confidence, assuming this was his moment to finally take charge. He probably thought the lawyer had failed to locate me, the fragile widow, and that he would now be appointed to oversee everything. He, Emily, and Adam sat on one side of the large mahogany table. My lawyer sat on the other. They had no idea I was watching from an adjacent office on a small security monitor, waiting for my cue. 5 minutes into the meeting, after the initial pleasantries were exchanged, I opened the door and walked in. I wore a simple dark blazer, my hair was cut neatly, and my hands, holding a single folder, were perfectly steady. The room fell silent. My lawyer stood up briefly, but my eyes were on the three people who thought I was broken. Victor's jaw literally dropped. His smug, confident expression melted away into slack-jawed disbelief. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Adam just stared, his face pale with shock. This was not the woman they had pushed out of her own home 2 months ago. Victor found his voice first, trying to wrap himself back in the cloak of fake concern. "Sarah. My God, where have you been? We've been worried sick." He started to stand, to come towards me, but I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "I've been busy, Victor," I said, my voice even and cool. It carried a weight he had never heard before. "Please, sit." I believe my lawyer was about to review the estate's governing documents. I took a seat beside my lawyer, placing my folder on the table. The power in the room had just tilted, and everyone felt it. My lawyer, taking his cue, cleared his throat and began to read from the trust Michael had established. He laid out the facts in a calm, neutral tone. He explained that all of Michael's assets were held in the trust. He clarified that the trust appointed a single, sole trustee with full and indisputable legal authority. He paused for effect before saying, "That sole trustee is you, Sarah." He then continued, stating that while the children were named as beneficiaries, Victor's name was mentioned only once, in a clause that explicitly excluded him from any role, benefit, or administrative power whatsoever. Victor erupted, slamming his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. Michael would never. She can't manage all of this, she doesn't know the first thing about it. He looked desperately at my children, then at the lawyer, searching for an ally. He found none. The room was silent, waiting for my response. I let his words hang in the air for a long moment before I finally turned my head and looked directly into his eyes. Michael didn't seem to think so, I said softly. He knew you'd try this, Victor. He saw who you were. I leaned forward slightly. And so did I. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor stared at me, his face a ruin of shock and fury, searching for the weak, fragile woman he could manipulate. But she wasn't there. She was gone for good. Victor didn't make a scene as he left the lawyer's office. He just deflated, like a balloon that had been pricked. All the arrogance and charisma drained out of him, leaving behind a gray, empty shell of a man. His punishment wasn't a lawsuit or a public scandal, it was quieter and, for him, much worse. It was irrelevance. He had craved power and control over Michael's legacy, and he was left with absolutely nothing. He was cut off from the family, from the money, and from the status he had tried so desperately to steal. He simply ceased to matter, and I never spoke to him again. My children were another story. They came to my small apartment 2 days later, standing in the doorway like lost kids. The pity was gone from their eyes, replaced by a deep, painful shame. Emily spoke first, her voice thick with tears, admitting that they had let Victor's confident lies drown out their own instincts. They said they were sorry, that they had been so lost in their own grief they had let him convince them I was too fragile to cope. They had betrayed me, and they knew it. I looked at my children, the two people I loved more than anything in the world, and I knew I had a choice. I could offer easy forgiveness and pretend none of this had ever happened, slipping back into my old role as the family peacemaker. Or I could honor the woman I had become. I love you both, I said, my voice soft but firm. That will never change. But the relationship we had before is gone. We have to build a new one now, and this time, it has to be built on respect. You have to see me as I am, not as who you think I need to be. And earning that trust back, that will take time. In the months that followed, I started building my own new life. I sold the big family house, with all of its ghosts and memories. It was a sad but necessary farewell to the past. I bought a small cottage for myself, a quiet place near the coast with a window that looked out onto the ocean. I unpacked the old easel I hadn't touched in 20 years and started to paint again, not for anyone's approval, but for the simple joy of putting color on a canvas. I wasn't the fragile widow, the vengeful wife, or even the powerful trustee. I was just Sarah. And for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough. I had lost the love of my life, but in the wreckage, I was finally finding myself. Looking back, the most powerful weapon I ever had was being underestimated. Victor, my children, our friends, they all looked at me and saw a quiet, fragile woman whose life was defined by her husband. Their biggest mistake was believing that was all I was. That mistake gave me the one thing I needed to survive, privacy. While they were busy feeling sorry for me, I was in the library learning. While they were whispering about my emotional state, I was on the phone with my lawyer, planning. Their pity was the camouflage that allowed me to regroup and fight back on my own terms. This was never a story about money or inheritance. The greatest gift Michael left me wasn't the trust fund, it was the letter that came with it. It was the reminder of who I was before I became a wife and a mother. It was a mirror held up to a strength I had forgotten I possessed. We play so many roles for the people we love, caregiver, supporter, peacemaker, and it's so easy to let those roles become the whole story. We forget that our own voice matters, that our own dreams have value, and that our dignity is not something other people can give us. It's something we must refuse to let them take away. I don't know what the rest of my life will look like. There is no grand plan. There are just quiet mornings with my paintbrush, the sound of the ocean outside my window, and the freedom to decide what my day will hold. My relationship with my children is slowly healing, built on a new foundation of honesty and respect. Some days are still lonely, but no day is without hope. And that is the one thing I would leave you with. If you feel invisible, if you feel like your voice has been silenced by the roles you play, please know this: you are stronger than you think. Trust that feeling, that quiet whisper inside that says you deserve more. Find your voice, and use it. It's the most powerful thing you will ever own.